Hello, everyone. Welcome to That's Inclusive. Today, I'm here with my good friends and comrades, Karen Blake and Carrie Duran, and today we're going to talk about advocacy in policy. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Vanessa. My name is Karen Blake, and I am a parent advocate. I I also am the director of community partnerships for Community Crossroads, but I live in the north. I live in the White Mountains, and my family is served by Northern Human Services. And I also am the co-chair of our Family Support Advisory Council. Carrie?
Yes, what a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And it's always fun for Karen and I to come together and share a little bit about our advocacy journey and how you can get involved as well. So, my name is Carrie Duran. I am also a mom and parent advocate. I have a 13-year-old daughter who experiences a developmental disability. I also have twin girls who are 18 years old and are now in college. I live in Wolfboro, so I am served as well by Northern Human Services, but I also work as the legislative liaison and advocacy and community engagement coordinator for Lakes Region Community Services.
Great. So I really appreciate you being here today and talking about something that is very dear to my heart, and that is civic engagement, the ability for people to be a part of the legislative process. And we here in New Hampshire, we have a privilege of being able to interact with our legislature and our policymakers on a day-to-day basis. The old adage, if you throw a rock, you'll hit a legislator in New Hampshire. Um, we have the third biggest legislature in the world, believe it or not. And some people think that that's problematic. I think it's wonderful. I think the fact that your neighbor is your representative is as grassroots as you can get when it comes to your ability to advocate for your needs to directly to the people who are making those decisions. So I want to ask you, how did you get started in advocacy policy?
Oh my goodness. Well, Karen, what's interesting is Karen and I both have similar stories as we started as parents that kind of began our road. If somebody had asked me a decade ago that someday I'd be a legislative liaison, I would have said, "What is that? What do you mean working with the legislature? Like, no way. There's no way I'd be doing that." But you never know, where your journey is going to take you specifically as a parent. And that is where it started for me with my daughter being born with the developmental disability of Down syndrome. I just felt I needed to learn as much as I could on how not only to support her due to her disability, but advocate at the school level, advocate at the state level, and I needed to educate myself and learn as much as possible as her mom. And so I started joining councils and committees and taking trainings. You will notice that in the state of New Hampshire, we're also so fortunate that there's so many nonprofits, including our area agencies, that offer free webinars and trainings on how to get involved with advocacy all the time. So I just started attending things. I became a part of the New Hampshire Leadership Series. That was in 2014. And if when I started all of that and jumping in, I had my doubts that I would be capable of ever standing in front of the legislature in in Representatives Hall and speaking about the needs of fully funding the developmental disability community. I would have imagined that. And you brought up a good point with how accessible our legislature is, and how lucky we are in New Hampshire. And the fact that a lower income single mom of 3 could go in and stand up in a room full of, potentially hundreds of people and share her story, is very profound, and that's very open to every single parent, individual citizen, to be able to do that. Is it a terrifying prospect? It absolutely is. And Karen and I have been doing it for many years, and we could still shake a little bit, but to be able to have the opportunity is such an honor. And I love what I now do for work, but it all just started advocating for my daughter, and just led to something else that I feel super fortunate to be able to do now. Karen.
So I love all of that, Carrie, and I agree with you, Vanessa. We're very, very fortunate in this state with the accessibility to our legislators. As a transplant, I've now lived in New Hampshire for 20 years. I was very familiar of a different New England state and how things function there, and I was so pleasantly surprised that you really do get to know your legislators. They are there for you. You can bump into them at the grocery store. I see mine walking their pet pretty much daily across the street. And that just doesn't happen in other states. And so we do have a lot of avenues to make those connections. Also, in a similar way, I was really not expecting to be an advocate. That was not my career goal. But now that I'm here, I can't imagine anything else. It is a wonderful opportunity and honor to talk to our legislators, as well as other policymakers, the department, about the needs of people who experience disability, but also to ensure that people with disability get to speak for themselves. That is a big push for me these days, given that my loved one is about to become an adult, and now it's going to be his turn. He's going to be the one who's going to advocate for himself, and I'm going to kind of step back a little bit because this is his life, not mine, and I really want him to have those opportunities to really make his voice heard. Now, professionally, yes, I am going to continue advocating. It is now my job. But I did want to go back a little bit, and just to really put it out there, that this was not what, myself or Carrie or other advocates had ever planned. And I could not imagine 15 years ago standing in Reps Hall either. Though I do sometimes, my piece of paper in my hand still shakes. It's not an easy thing, but there are so many ways that you can advocate. So yes, there's legislative advocacy, but there's lots of ways for you to get involved. I actually started as a parent information center volunteer advocate for special education. And that all came about when my loved one was transitioning from family-centered early supports and services to the school when he was 3. And I remember back then the the many-page booklet that they handed you was called, the Lilac Book. And I remember going through the Lilac Book, and even with my, degree in legal studies, I could barely read it and really understand what my loved one was eligible for. And all I could think of is, if I'm having trouble reading this, what about other parents? Who's sitting with them at that table? And an advocate was born. And it has just continued on from there. You know, I became a parent information center volunteer advocate. I also was a part of the New Hampshire Leadership Series. I am also a LEND graduate, Leadership in Education and Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities. And I eventually went and got my master's in public policy. Now, I dove into the deep end, but there is a lot of room in between where people, you know, at their own comfort level can, you know, either even just, you know, begin to toe you know, put a toe into advocacy, or, you know, jump full in, and there's everything in between. And I hope today that we're going to give people some ideas about how you can begin to do your advocacy, and even in just some of the smallest ways.
Yeah, I think one of the great ways for people to kind of dip their toe into advocacy is starting really local, starting like in your town or in your city. You know, I do some advocacy in my community, and I started by just going to Board of Aldermen meetings, going to planning board meetings, just showing up, not even necessarily speaking or expressing an opinion, but just kind of like watching how it works, getting to know the people who are involved, and also just kind of getting to know the other people who are also advocating, building a network of
Mhm.
people in your community. So can you talk a little bit about how you encourage people to advocate in their communities?
Sure. Could I jump in, Karen?
Oh, absolutely, Carrie, go for it.
So you brought up something really amazing, Vanessa, is that you talked about showing up and building those relationships. And at our local level, I think showing up is 98% of the advocacy, is
Mhm.
giving yourself an opportunity to educate yourself about the local policy issues. In Wolfboro, we have a board of selectmen, and going as well to your school board meetings. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to get up to the microphone. Public speaking can be terrifying for so many folks, but you're going to feel stronger the more you show up. The more you build some relationships, the more folks see you there. Many times I have gone to a Board of Selectmen meeting, and then a couple days later, I will run into someone at the grocery store, which seems to be where we see most folks in our small towns. And they will say, "Thank you so much for coming. This was a selectman member. We really appreciate the public attending, and not just the usual faces. You know, there's a lot of folks that do come to every local town event, and our Board of Selectmen, our city councils, they're really looking for a broader perspective. And everyone has a voice. Everyone has something to share. So don't ever feel like, well, I'm not a homeowner. I'm not a business owner. I work at the local coffee shop. Why would they want to hear from me? They absolutely do. And that
Mhm.
is your privilege and your right as a citizen and as a voter, as a member of a community, to share your voice, be heard and be seen, is so important. So I love that you said that, Vanessa, the showing up and just dipping your toe in, showing your face, saying hello, smiling, you know, meeting your neighbors. That is how it starts. And then you get hooked, right, Karen? Like you
Oh,
and
yeah.
I both just got hooked, and we love policy and we love advocating.
And just to even build off of that, I absolutely love that, Carrie. You know, is you know, it's the same thing with your state legislators. they do want to hear from you. They are only as good as the information they have to make the decisions
Mhm.
that they need to make. And if they don't hear from you and don't hear your stories and your perspectives, they're not able to make the most informed decisions, if you will. So they really do want to hear from you. And we now have lots of ways at the state level to actually be heard. You know, we have the ability for any bill, and again, this is not true of every state. We have for every bill that is presented in the House or the Senate, there has to be a public hearing. And that is not true of every state. So we are very fortunate there. There are many ways to interact with your legislators, and there is going on to the general court website and just, having an opinion on a bill is very easy. You can sign in support or not, or neutral. In the House, you can write a little blurb. You can also email your legislators and find out more about, who's on some of the key committees. But I do want to, get back to that. You don't have to do it all. And I think that that's really important to hear. You see, you're hearing from, Carrie and I and Vanessa, and we do jump into a lot of different things. But if you find your thing that you're passionate about and you speak on just that, you're doing a whole lot of good. Because, you guys are the experts, and you're the experts in your own lives and how things impact you, your families, and your communities. And they really do need to hear your perspectives.
Thank you for saying that. I think it's important that not only do you not have to do it all, you don't have to know it all. I think that that's something
Yes,
that
Vanessa, you're so right.
we have to work
Agreed.
through that, because it's intimidating to get up in front of a committee and they might ask you questions, right?
Right.
But you are an expert in your own life experience. And I think that that is so valuable. And I think that we need to make sure people understand how valuable that is. It's not only valuable to the legislators who are hearing you talk about how policy impacts your life, but it's all of the public hearings are recorded
Right.
and anyone can watch them. And I think it's valuable that other people in our state get to hear other people's life experiences, and maybe to learn something new, and maybe to feel like, oh, that person feels that way too and is having that experience too.
Right.
So I think that's something that a lot of people have a hard time pushing through. And also, I think that it's a way for legislators to get to know us as human beings. Like
Yes.
that's what one of the purposes you serve when you
Right.
go there, is that you're showing them a face as a human, and that continues to humanize the policies and the decisions that they're making.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about how you build relationships with legislators, like
Mhm.
one-on-one, really authentic relationships with them.
Carrie, why don't we continue on? Why don't you jump in first, and then I'll close us out.
Sure.
Go for it.
Sure. Well, I don't know, Karen, we keep going back to produce.
Yeah.
And you know, the
It's true.
grocery store, I guess as a mom, I spend so much time there, but I have had my best conversations with my local select board members or my legislators over the avocados. And you brought up a good point earlier, Vanessa and Karen, that, our legislators want to hear from us. So when you see them at the post office, say hello. You don't have to have a big conversation or be prepared with a 2-minute, as we call, elevator speech about, a certain policy or bill. You just go up and say, hi, Senator, hi, Representative. My name is Carrie Duran, and I live here in Wolfboro. And I just wanted to introduce myself. And 9 times out of 10, I would bet 10 times out of 10, your legislator is going to be so happy that you reached out and said hello. And they could, have a conversation with you right then and there in the post office. Or they might give you their card and say, you know what, I would love to talk with you further about this. Will you please reach out to me? That is definitely one of the advantages of living in New Hampshire and having access to our policymakers and our lawmakers. If you're a little shy to reach out to them in person, email them. Sometimes when you go on GenCourt, we haven't talked about that yet. That's the website that is everything New Hampshire legislature. Sometimes they'll have their personal emails
Yep.
on there. And sometimes they'll have their personal phone numbers on there because they want to have that contact with legislators. So again, you reach out, you make that first contact to build a relationship with a policymaker or legislator. You don't have to have a wonderful speech to say. You just introduce yourself and say hello. And that is where the beginning of that relationship will start, is with a hello and a smile.
And just to build off of that, you don't even have to do it when you have something specific to say. In fact, I would recommend meeting them before you do. If you, just even introduce like, hey, I am a constituent. Constituent means that they represent you, essentially. And just say, hey, this is who I am. I live in your town. This is my family. And, some of the things that might be important to you, even if there isn't a piece of legislation. Because once you make those first initial connections, it will be easier when you do have something you really want to say. You can do it right now if you have something that you're very passionate about, or something that might impact you or your family. Please reach out even if you haven't done before. But if there isn't, this is a good opportunity to begin to build those relationships. And over time, you will really have a good dialogue with your legislators, as well as other policymakers, selectmen, school board members. Get to know them and have them get to know you and your family. If that's, that's something that, an area that you're coming from. But I will say that when you are meeting people out and about, or you are making a phone call, because Carrie is 100% right. If they're giving your personal email and they're putting their personal cell phone or home phone number on it. Remember, some of our legislators are a little older. It may be a home phone. And somebody other than your legislator may answer that phone. Make sure that it's at a reasonable hour, and that you're inquiring, is now a good time? And if it's not a good time, can we set up a time?
I love that, Karen. I love that. That's so true.
Even just as a meet and greet, can I meet you for coffee? Can I go up to them at different events? Now, places you can find your legislators besides the grocery store. So you will find them there. And fun fact, most of them have specific license plates. So you can, at a glance of a car, know if there's a legislator in the nearby vicinity. But any events that are going on in your town, there's a lot of times that your elected officials just show up. So that's a really good opportunity. They're there to be a part of the community, that you can talk to them. One representative that we only have one. It's a small town, but representative it goes to everything. So So I have had great conversations with Representative Stringham at the Lincoln Library book swap. He actually came to um, one of the freestyle competitions at our Rec Hill, and he was there to be supportive of the community. So you don't have to look very hard to find them. I love what you said earlier, Vanessa, about, throwing a rock and you'll hit a representative, because it is kind of true. Also on the general court website, they also have pictures. Many of them have pictures of your representative. So if you don't know what your representative looks like, that's another great piece of information on that catch-all website for
Mhm.
everything legislative.
Mhm. And
Vanessa,
a
I had
lot of,
something to add to this, if I may.
yeah,
Sorry, I just talked to, so many times our legislators are hearing from constituents when something is wrong,
Yeah,
when they're upset about something. Remember that building relationships with our legislators also means saying thank you. So
agreed.
if there is something that they were able to accomplish or they supported that was really beneficial to your family, reach out with an old-fashioned handwritten thank you note or a thank you email, and that is just as important.
yeah, I agree. And, as in a lot of the housing work that I do in my
Right.
community, when we decided that we were going to go to the planning board meetings and go to the zoning board meetings, one of the things that we consciously decided was that we were going to show up to advocate for things. And after a while of doing this, someone from one of the boards commented to me how refreshing it was to have people come to the meeting and say that they want something to happen instead of the constant hearing that they don't from people who don't want things to happen. Um, and I think that lent a lot to being able to build relationships with people who were sitting on these boards, is because when you're coming at advocacy from a productive point of view, people want to work with you. Um, and I think it also builds trust. I think that when you are building a relationship with decision makers, when you're building that kind of trust, even when you don't agree on something, you have a level of trust that you understand that it's simply because of positioning and not an adversarial way that you want to communicate with them, right? Um, so
Absolutely, Vanessa.
yeah, and a lot of that kind of comes from, like Karen was saying, just like having personal relationships, being encountering people outside of that direct role that you're playing. Like, you're my legislator, I'm the advocate. Like, having opportunities in your community to interact in different ways and find out things that you have in common with each
Mhm.
other. um so I want to talk a little bit about how you teach other advocates to work with legislators and work with decision makers, and also on the training program that you two have developed.
Mhm. Karen, would you like to start this one off?
Sure. So there are a lot of wonderful programs here in New Hampshire that you can become a part of. One is the New Hampshire Leadership Series. Carrie and I now assist the New Hampshire Leadership Series for what they call their leadership weekend. We also do drop-ins with educating about the legislative process, which we call Legislative 101. We also do a lot of support within our roles as legislative liaisons to educate and support other individuals who are looking to testify and to give written testimony. We're there as a resource for anyone who needs us. Also to explain anything that might be happening, because some of these bills are involved. And sometimes the meaning is not clear. So we do a lot of support with individuals, families, and at the request of anyone that that we can help out with. I know that we're also doing some additional outreach. I am, as a part of Community Crossroads, it will be starting next Friday, a Policy Partners pop-up, which will be in the afternoons at 1:30. And Carrie has, and I got that idea from Carrie, and doing that as
That's a
well.
great idea.
But we're also, Community Crossroads is also going to be sponsoring additional webinars throughout the legislative session. Our first one is going to be, learning about the law that assists for disabilities, which is RSA 171A. With the wonderful Kathy Spinney, who happens to be a board member and a parent of Community Crossroads. And that will be on Monday, March 3rd. But Carrie and I have created a webinar training program called The Art of the Share. And it is a program where we help people learn how to share your story and the different aspects of sharing your story, because that's the basis of any of your advocacy, is how things may or may not impact you positively or negatively. I really like what Vanessa said about telling them when they're doing a good job too. And also, whenever possible, even if you're not 100% for something, if you see a better way, let them know. And being really productive in a different way. Now, but back to the art of the share. So this came about because we wanted to have people have an opportunity to talk about the aspects of sharing their story, how to let cut that, Vanessa. How to to write your story, what we call an elevator pitch, which is 1 minute to 30 seconds, and also to condense your story, because many of the public hearings that we go to, you only have 2 minutes. So Carrie, do you want
Sure.
to tell a little
Well,
bit about what you're
yes.
doing?
Well, and one of the things that Karen talks about a lot in our training, The Art of the Share, is having everybody has their core story, their
Yeah.
history of how they got to this moment. And once you have that crafted,
Yes.
then throughout, if you're advocating for your child, you can craft and adjust that and change that to, gosh, I once advocated for all-day kindergarten. Well, then I advocated for the Medicaid dental bill when Katie was older. Now I'm advocating, for something else because she's 14 years old. So, but the core story stays the same. And, you want it to be flexible and malleable to then change it to the specific policy issue that you're focused on. So we teach you how to do that. And what's just a little bit of history, Karen, we didn't share. Karen and I both met as part of the New Hampshire Leadership Series.
Right.
She was actually the mentor, I believe, at the time. And so we met there. That was in 2014, so a few years back. And so our relationship started as in that capacity, as I was learning how to be an advocate. She had already been through the program, but we served together on the Family Support Council for Northern Human Services, and through that, became friends and then colleagues, as I seemed to follow in her footsteps in her career path. And she's been an amazing friend and mentor for me. But we started The Art of the Share during COVID, because that's when everything switched to online and
Yes,
and so we started making videos about how to access the legislature online in this new world.
right,
And so it's kind of started out of necessity. Okay, how do we access this? And then it just sort of grew into the art of the share. And that's something to remember as well when you're choosing trainings that appeal to you. Um, understanding that your situation changes as a parent, as an advocate, and what worked really well for you and your family a year ago, maybe you need to learn a new approach, a new way to do things. There is no wrong answer, wrong way. It's making it your own. And that's what we hope with the Art of the Share, which we haven't scheduled one for the spring. We've got to do that. Um, yeah, coming up. So I also offer through Lakes Region Community Services every Friday at noon, a legislative update Zoom hour, advocacy hour that is a little bit free form that employees, staff, family members, and member of the community come on and what are you concerned about in this moment? And it's kind of turned into a discussion, not necessarily a training, but how do we move forward with an onslaught of policy changes that are
right,
constantly coming our way? And how do we process it? And,
right.
and how do we move forward from that? So it's kind of become a community of process, just processing what's happening and what the next steps and next action are that we can possibly take as citizens, as advocates. But as Karen said, in helping families and individuals to share their stories, reach out to legislators. It just starts with your personal story that you are the expert in your personal story. And I think it's important to remember for our legislators when we're doing those meet and greets and we're building those relationships is to invite them to see you as a resource. You're a resource with your child, with your loved one or family member, a particular policy issue. You have that information. Maybe they don't know anyone with a developmental disability. So, hey, Carrie, we have this coming through. I remember you were a great resource last year. Can you give me some feedback on, this particular policy issue? Be seen as a resource, develop those relationships, and your legislators will come back to you time and time again because you've established that relationship as a parent. You don't have to be an industry professional. You don't have to be a legislative liaison you just have to be a citizen, and you are automatically a valuable resource.
Yeah, that's totally 100% true. We see, the three of us are down at the legislative office building in the State House often, mostly because that's our job. But I see time and time again that if someone is advocating about something that they think is problematic or maybe it can be fixed, that oftentimes legislators will reach out to us or to advocates and ask us if we would give them some input on how to fix a bill. And that's when you really feel like you're working together, because this whole governmental process, this whole decision-making process, it's really about working together with our legislators, our local decision makers, and all of us who are citizens and who are part of helping them understand and helping them uphold the promises that policy makes to us, for all of us to build a better life.
Well said,
I,
Vanessa. Well said.
oh, thank you. I wanna close out by just talking a little bit about what Carrie used the word onslaught. And I think that sometimes some of us can get a little bit burnt out Because once you start getting involved and starting to understand how policy affects our daily life, you really can become really deeply entrenched in everything that's going on. And we are living in a very overwhelming time, all the way from the federal government, all the way down to our local community. And it can feel like a lot. It can feel like we're trying to take on a lot. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how what self-care that you engage in order to kind of pace yourself and not burn out while you're doing the work that you're doing.
Uh, it's so important, Vanessa, especially right now. I couldn't agree more, in self-care, and as well as being very protective of your time and your mental space, if you will. And one thing that I did want to talk about, before we switch over a little bit is just to not go on the assumption that your legislators know anything about disability. They really, really, really need you to speak up and advocate. I just always myself go back and I try to remember and give people a little grace, about not knowing, because prior to my loved one being diagnosed, I knew absolutely nothing about disability and nothing about developmental disabilities. And I think that, going in with that grace and understanding that the individual that you're speaking to may know nothing about it, and to be a little patient, that they may not know and they might not say the right things. So please, just give them a little grace, because they really do want to know, about you, your families, and your situations. But to segue back over to what Vanessa was asking about, how do you manage all the onslaught of information that is coming at us? It is it's understandably, it is really a lot. So a couple of things that I have been doing is, I don't watch the news anymore. I read the news, and I only read a couple of key news outlets. I do get alerts, so that also gives me the space to deal with the information at a time that I can do it. And one of the things, especially for the legislative session, once upon a time, the legislature really only had public hearings on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and now they do it 5 days a week. And one thing that I have been advocating for people to do is, we get a lot of the information the Friday before. Take some time on your weekends and look at the public hearings that are coming up for the week, and just get it done on the weekend, and then you don't have to worry about it. So what I mean by that is signing into bills, for or against, doing a little blurb, taking a little time maybe on a Saturday or Sunday morning and getting it done, and then it's done. And you don't have to worry about it anymore for those that are just dipping their toe in. If there are a couple of bills that you're really invested in, that's what you do. From the developmental disability community, a couple of things that we're really focusing on is the budget. And one of the other things that we're advocating for people to do is to pick your thing. So we're going to be asking everyone to come out for the budget. Whatever your opinion is, we want you there. And if that's the only thing that you can do this legislative session, that might be the thing for you to choose. But the other piece is, if you have a little more time, pick one other thing. Is it one bill? Is it one area? And then you have to just trust the fact that there are other people who are working on the other things that you're really interested in and invested in. So if right now you have a school-age child, and maybe one bill is really important to you, or one aspect of that policy is really important to you, do that. and then trust that people like Vanessa are working on housing, that other people are working on employment, that are, really understanding that we are a community and there's a large community of disability advocates. But if you do your part, you're helping more than you know. And I like to think of it almost as a tapestry of advocacy, that we're all working together to make one beautiful picture. As I'm looking at Vanessa's background, which is a beautiful picture.
I love a tapestry of advocacy.
I
love
love that too. That should be the title of our next webinar, your next workshop, Karen. I love it. All right, so we are keeping that name. We are keeping that name. That's amazing. So well said. One of the things that it brought to my mind, Karen, and with self-care is it's important to find your village of support and
Right.
and having that trust, like you said, that there's other people working on other issues. Because one of the things that I'm finding now is I am involved professionally, but also as a mom and a parent and a woman and just a citizen, is I feel like I am on 24 hours a day. There's something to be worried about and concerned about. And my nature is to just say yes to everything and fix everything. And and that's not healthy for anyone. And I can't possibly do everything. So you talked about earlier about grace, Karen. Having grace with myself is a difficult lesson. It's something that I am working on, that I can't do everything and be everything to everyone every minute of the day. And maybe that comes as you get older, that you start to realize, and I just won't mention my age on this, but very
It's
proud
the same
of my
as
age.
mine, so we'll just be quiet.
We're
Yes.
all the same age.
Yes, we're all what, 25? We're all like
Yes,
25.
exactly.
Yes, we'll go with that. But it is having that grace and and finding your niche. What is your niche? So if you're gonna focus on one policy area, that's great, and you be 100% at that policy area. And the same is with my friends on this podcast, Miss Vanessa and Karen, know that I tend to volunteer for a lot of committees and councils.
No.
Yes, quite a few of them all at the same time. Can you believe that I've shaved off like 5 of them
Wow.
thereabouts? Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I'm still involved with, but I have shaved off a few. And it's because like I being a part of these committees and councils there, it's educating for me. It does fill my bucket. As they say, it is something that I enjoy for me. I don't go to yoga. I join a committee. That's what I do for me. I probably
can
should
relate.
go to yoga, but I join a committee and that fills my bucket and that works for me. But I would just recommend to folks, have grace with yourself, find your village of support, and know that, as Karen said, anything that you do is helping to weave the tapestry of advocacy.
That's great. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Such a pleasure.
I would love to have you back. So maybe we can talk about other things like the budget. when we're not sick of talking about the budget. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, Vanessa. Pleasure.
Thank you, Vanessa.